Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the Orgreave Inquiry that the government has just launched. And although Orgreave was a very different situation to Hillsborough in terms of the causes and outcomes, they both represented very similar injustice. A Thatcher government-led conspiracy using South Yorkshire police in order to demonise groups of people in the north of England. It will be far too late for anyone guilty to be brought to justice, but just as with the Hillsborough inquiry, we can at least make sure the general public know the full truth. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So Orgreaves in South Yorkshire, the area I grew up in, the mining village I grew up in during the miners' strike, didn't see any violence, but we certainly knew about it happening elsewhere, even as kids. But the biggest battleground, because it was like a civil war in many ways, was at Orgreave. Today, Orgreave is less known as the place and more the scene of that violent clash between police officers and striking miners, thousands of them. The government and South Yorkshire police claimed that the miners orchestrated organised violence against officers. 95 miners were charged with riot offences in 1985. Now, the trial collapsed completely as the defence was able to credibly demonstrate that there was a pretty good chance the police officers giving evidence were actually just lying in court, not that any officers were charged with perjury. Many years later, in 2012, The Guardian reported on concerns that some people who'd been looking at it had over the whole affair. For example, a review of police witness statements, when you put them together, showed that, oh, these look very similar. Word for word the same, at least in the first parts of them, like someone had dictated to the officers involved and then they just made a few changes according to their own relevant personal experience of the day. It also did not escape people's attention that it involved the same police force, South Yorkshire Police, as had been involved in what was at the time known to be a Thatcher-led cover-up over the Hillsborough disaster. Orgreave did not result in deaths, though plenty of lifelong trauma, but it was arguably worse than Hillsborough in one respect. The Hillsborough disaster was essentially caused by incompetence. The main injustice was the cover-up. The Thatcher government made sure the police took no blame by instead directing blame onto the Liverpool fans attending the game. For many years, the public believed that the disaster was caused by innocent people travelling from Liverpool. But miners claimed that with Orgreave, it was a carefully planned and premeditated operation by the police in order to deliberately trigger violent clashes so that they could demonise striking miners and turn the public against their cause. And it is this which the Orgreave Inquiry will investigate. As it all took place over 40 years ago, I don't think there's any serious prospect of bringing anyone to justice, although Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who's launched the inquiry today, has not ruled it out. But the people behind it, senior officers, ministers and officials at the top of government directing it, they would have been middle-aged then, they'll be long dead now. You might catch the odd young copper from the time who committed perjury, but I think that would be small fry. So if it's already generally agreed that the police and government lied and that this was clearly the first of two major injustices orchestrated by Thatcher and South Yorkshire Police in the 1980s, and there's little prospect of really charging anyone who was ultimately orchestrating it, what can the inquiry do? Well, it can do a couple of things which investigative journalists cannot do. First of all, the inquiry will have the power to compel people to give evidence. A journalist can ask, this inquiry will demand. It will also have access to documents which have been kept secret all this time, citing national security. Interestingly, it turns out that Northumbria Police had destroyed all of their documentation related to Orgreave. They destroyed it last year. Now, this is dodgy as hell. Why would you destroy papers relating to something that happened like 40 years ago? Specifically last year. Let me hazard a guess. Labour promised this Orgreave inquiry in their manifesto. Now, call me cynical. I think that's the reason. Now, the atrocities centre on South Yorkshire Police, but they were bolstered by officers from other forces. It was a huge operation, right? So other forces will have known what really happened as well. Frankly, I'd be holding a bit of a separate investigation into why those papers were destroyed last year specifically. See, I smell foul play. They say they destroyed them sort of last spring. It was before Rishi Sunak called the election, so they can say they destroyed them before Labour launched their manifesto. However, throughout the whole of last year, everyone knew there would be an election at some point last year. They knew that Labour were nailed on to win. Labour had also been vocal about wanting an inquiry for quite a few years now. I think it's hugely suspicious that they acted specifically last year. I would want to know why. Needless to say, Cooper has written to all other police forces, ordering them to preserve all documents still in existence. So they are going to be seen by the inquiry. All we really know at the moment is that the police were not honest in the subsequent fallout of Orgreave. What we don't know is exactly what they were covering up. Was it just covering up very heavy-handed attacks on minors? Or, as many believe, were they covering up what was a premeditated plan to trigger violence against the people they were supposed to be serving? You know, there's too much speculation, but there are more facts ready to be uncovered. At the very least, the miners involved that day want it to be officially acknowledged that, yes, some of their number did attack police officers without just cause, but the majority were just picketing and the police kettled and charged them without need and without provocation. That Thatcher effectively used the police as a literal weapon of war against our community. That the government, at the very least, had knowledge that violence was used to crush dissent and then covered it up. But it will also raise questions about Hillsborough as well. Orgreave happened several years before the Hillsborough disaster. Now, why did Thatcher's government also cover up the failures of South Yorkshire Police, same police force, over the stadium disaster? Was it simply because Thatcher would always corruptly cover for the police no matter what? Or was it because Orgreave was ultimately a government plan carried out loyally by the police, and the government returned that loyalty several years later by protecting them from an unintended failure for prior services rendered? I can't imagine there'll be any way of really knowing anytime soon, because if the Hillsborough inquiry didn't turn up the answer to that question, I don't think Orgreave will. That predates it. But you have two cases here of extreme corruption from the same police force, just a few years apart, with the same government complicit in it, if not orchestrating the cover-up. A cover-up that didn't just protect the guilty, but specifically blamed the innocent. South Yorkshire Police, as they are now, they've said they will cooperate with the inquiry. Frankly, they need to, and be seen doing so in order to really heal the damage done by their former officers 40 years ago. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.